So far, we've been working with the display values throughout the WizCreate editors, and now we're going to shift to using raw values. A raw value is the value that the program sees for a given property, as opposed to the display values, which is what you as the developer sees. For example, you might choose a red color from the color palette. The display value that you see is this nice red square, but what the program sees is a color code that looks like this. To work with raw values, you just need to make a quick selection in your WizCreate app settings. To do this, go to your WizCreate app homepage, tap the profile icon, and then tap Edit Raw Values. Now, you can jump back into development mode of your app, and you'll see blue info icons next to each property in an editor. The original editing capability is still accessible, but now you have another option for editing properties. By tapping any blue icon, you can type right there to edit properties with the raw value. Most of the raw values throughout the editors will look almost the same as their display values. However, there are a few exceptions: color properties, media properties, and the position and size property. Raw values for color properties are an RGB code, which stands for red, green, blue. It's a breakdown of how much red, green, and blue from 0 to 255 is used to create a color. If you're new to RGB or RGBA color, check out rgbacolorpicker.com, or select a color in WizCreate, then check the raw value and see how they correspond. Pro tip: you can create a level of transparency in your color selection by adding a fourth value to the RGB code, which would make it an RGBA code. The fourth digit is on a scale between 0 and 100, where 100 equals completely opaque and 0 equals completely transparent. So, if I were to add :75 to this color code, then you can see the color change to 75% opacity, making my text box slightly see-through. Using the raw values of color properties is incredibly helpful for repeating color selections so that text and border color, for example, match exactly. Simply tap the raw value, copy, cancel, tap another color property's raw value, paste, and save. Before turning on raw values, the way to set position and size within an editor was to utilize these sliders or drag and drop the object within this property pop-up. Notice that these 4 parameters specify a number. It's those 4 numbers in this exact same order that make up the raw value of this property: x, y, width, and height. 2 things to note. The x and y coordinates refer to the location of the top left corner of an object, and the width and height are a number out of 100 that designates the percentage of the screen that the object will take up. So for instance, an object whose position and size raw value is 0, 0, 100, 100 would be centered on the page and would take up the entire page. A position and size value of 30, 20, 40, 60 would be a tall rectangular shape centered on the page. This is really useful for exact placement of objects on a page, especially when paired with drag off to lock an object after it's placed exactly where you'd like it to be. It's also really useful for directly lining up objects, like 2 buttons in a row, for instance. Let's look at raw values for media selections. When you select an image, video, sound, or similar, the raw value is the file path of that media file's location. So if I select an image from the media library, the display value is a thumbnail of it, but the raw value looks like this. Raw values really come in handy as variable values for scripting. Let's look at that same button and text scripting from before, but this time the button will be programmed to use raw values to set the background color of the text box. Before we move on, there's one other app setting that you might find useful. Back onto the home screen through the profile icon, you'll see an option for High Precision Grid. If you select that, you'll notice that the position and size properties now contain 2 decimal places. Another setting available is the double tap to edit. This is really up to user preference, but I find that I prefer working with this turned on so that I have a little bit more control over when my editor pops up. FYI, throughout the rest of the learning path, I'll have my raw values, high precision grid, and double tap settings all toggled to on.